Hi, I'm Lauren.
And I'm Matt.
And this is Publish and Prosper,
Where publishing, e-commerce, and marketing collide.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Publish and Prosper. This one is episode 74, I believe. And it's exciting because if you did not listen to the spoiler at the end of last week's episode, or if you're not watching, I have a guest in the studio with me.
Hello.
This is Paul Hobday. Paul, what's your title these days?
I think currently it is Senior Marketing Manager.
Okay, so Paul is the Senior Marketing Manager here at Lulu and also kind of single-handedly responsible for keeping all of us functional.
It's like herding cats.
Yeah, pretty much. Mm-hmm. What's that like?
It's exhausting.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. Paul's name is one that you've heard many times on this podcast before. We reference his content as our blog writer and kind of master of all copy.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm going to put that in my title.
Please do.
Master of all copy.
Yeah, I could probably make that. I could probably jazz that up a little bit
right now about it. Like,
it's a great idea.
Copy master. I like master of all copy better.
It's like page master, but copy master.
Ooh. Gems. I'm going to take all of them.
You're welcome. You can have those for free as a thank you for doing the podcast with me.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. But I thought it might be fun to get to get Paul on the podcast instead of us just referencing his content and his knowledge and experience and words of wisdom. Maybe he will share them with us directly.
Can you call this episode Paul's Pod?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I can.
That's all I want.
Although 4 different people DM'd me after the Chelsea episode to ask me if I made a typo when I called it the Pod in the show notes.
I was one of those people, but...
Yes, you were. You were the first.
Well, it wasn't that I doubted that you were making a joke. I just wanted to double check.
That's important. That is an important part of copywriting and copy editing, which may or may not be relevant depending on where this episode goes.
Yeah, I mean, it might be.
Yeah. Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows where we're going?
I have absolutely no idea. I'm not even really sure how I get in here.
I bullied you into it.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't give you much choice.
Nope.
Actually.
Put me in this room and shut the door.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sit down and talk.
I have the key, too.
Oh, that's not terrifying. Cool.
It's great. This is kind of fun. Usually Matt's the one in power in this room, so it's great. But anyway.
Matt, please help.
There's no escaping this. So we have Paul here for a while, so I thought it might be fun to talk about some Paul-related things and some publishing-related things.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear about my pen collection?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I do.
Paul-related things.
Yeah, and I'm sure the pens are very relevant.
I use them to write sometimes.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
Your toolkit's important.
It is. You see how we segued that so well?
It was beautiful, but now I'm actually going to steer it in a complete opposite direction.
Go for it. Do your thing.
Thank you. Thanks. So I did actually want to just really quickly shout out an update from last episode.
Oh, yeah, I segued too soon. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It was such a smooth segue that I'm sorry that I have to bring it back around here. The episode that came out last Wednesday was recorded on May 12th. That was the one on audiobooks and audiobook narration. And in that episode, we talked about how Audible does not accept audiobooks that are produced with AI narration. And Matt and I speculated a little bit on why that is and how that was going to change, when that was going to change. We were both very confident about the fact that they were probably going to introduce their own system for it, and that's why they weren't currently accepting it that way. And sure enough, on May 13th, they announced that they are launching a new program for cover-to-cover AI narration tools.
Does it feel good being right about that?
It does feel good being right about that, even if I wish I wasn't. So I will link that article in the show notes of that episode. So if you are somebody who's paying attention to these, chances are you've already seen the article itself. But I did just want to shout that out because, of course, you know, the time that we're getting ahead of ourselves and recording content a little bit in the future, literally less than 24 hours after we say something on an episode, it gets negated.
Y'all are just you're right at the peak of everything that's happening. Your fingers are on the pulse.
Wow, that's so true.
Yeah.
Now that we've gotten that out of the way and I never have to think about Audible ever again. It's not true. I'm in the middle of an audiobook right now. But, whatever. Off the clock.
Off the clock.
Different concerns, different problems. What are we actually talking about today? What did you want to bring to the table today?
Oh, well, so a lot of things, but the one that got approved to bring to the table.
True.
So back in, I think, January, you and Matt did an episode about writing habits, and it's something that's kind of very near and dear to my heart because both for work and for fun, I write a lot. So I was hoping to talk a little bit more about writing habits and maybe expand on what you all talked about previously and thinking about, how we write for ourselves versus how we write for work, whether our work is something we do for ourselves or if it's, we working for someone. But and then to link at some of the tools of writing, which is why I made the joke about my pen collection. I really do have a pen collection, but that was my attempt at a segue.
It was genuinely a very good segue.
Thank you.
I'm honestly disappointed that I had to.
Can you edit it and put it after the? Probably not.
All right. I am actually really curious to hear your thoughts on the original episode that we did on writing habits, which I did listen to in preparation for this episode because I knew that was something that we were considering talking about, and personally thought we gave some great advice in there.
Oh, yeah. So I don't want to say you gave bad advice. I just think I have different opinions about how to create good writing habits.
Which is, I think, really important.
Yeah.
Because also one of the things that I think after listening back to that episode is that it's how to build a writing habit if you have undiagnosed ADHD.
It is, and I didn't want to call either of you out, but
it's okay. I've had it diagnosed now, so it's
because the amount of butterflies that flitted by during that conversation, and you just were like, "Ooh." There was a couple.
Yeah.
But also, yes, very much the way you structured the conversation that you had about habits was around planning, goal setting, timing, repetition, and while those are all things that you should be thinking about, the actual writing habit should start becoming thoughtless, and it just becomes a thing you do so that you can then have a bigger goal. Like the writing, it's good, have a goal of writing every day, but once that should become routine rather than a goal. And the goal should be to do something with whatever you're writing, whether it's, fix your ADHD by journaling. I don't actually know if that's the thing. I'm not a mental health professional. This is not real advice. Or writing a book, or building a blog network. We're on a podcast now, but I blog. There's different things. Talking with your fingers versus talking with your mouth, very different things. So again, I don't want it to come off as like I'm saying you were all wrong, because I do like proving Matt wrong when I can. Doesn't happen often, but I gotta savor those moments. So much as just expand on it with the idea that for me, a writing habit is more about that second goal, because the writing part of it has become so routine and so built into my kind of day to day that I don't even really need to set a goal to write 1,000 words a day, or I'm not even thinking about it in those terms anymore, because I don't have to write 1,000 words a day to hit my goal if my goal is to, finish this book this year. Okay,
so maybe, if that episode was like a beginner's guide to building a writing habit, this is maybe like the
tools to take your writing habit to the next level.
And there's where Paul comes in as our blog copywriter, because he's just got a list of titles in his back pocket.
Paul's Pod, your guide to taking your writing habit to the next level.
I think we're done here.
Yeah, let's go.
Great.
Wrap it up. Then you can take 10 minutes. I'm so good at this.
See?
So efficient.
Easy. So am I getting ahead of myself if I ask you what your writing, daily writing habit looks like?
Oh, there's no rhyme or reason to this, so we should just kind of bounce around.
Nor is there ever.
Yeah, right. I don't want to go off on a tangent of the whole show by doing things in a different way than you all normally do it. So this is still your show.
That's true.
For now. Paul's Pod. Here it comes.
You can take it over whenever you want.
Nope. Hard pass.
That's what I thought.
This is not me showing interest in that. That's not what I'm saying, my friend. I told you I was going to look at the camera once. I'm sorry. You can cut that out.
You've done it at least 3 times.
No, that's me looking off. You said to look off into space contemplatively, like you're smart and stuff.
No, it's okay.
So I've been trying to do that.
I actually think it works for your voice.
Okay,
so
good. I'll try not to do it anymore.
No. You do what you want to do.
So my writing habit is actually fairly simple. So one of the things I do almost every morning, when I first, I've got kind of a general routine for getting ready for the day. I generally sit down to work between 7 and 7:30. And the first thing I do is open up kind of my personal digital notebook, and I write a daily note. And that's usually a reflection on the previous day. It can be 10 words or 1,000 words, depending on what I did the previous day and how interested I am. And then I go through and take all of my handwritten notes from work, because I have a notebook, a physical notebook, and for work and for personal things, and a digital notebook for both as well. I take all of my personal or handwritten notes from my day's work day before and transcribe them into a Google Doc that is kind of my work journal.
I think that is actually one thing that you, me, and Matt all overlap on.
Yeah.
Despite the other distinctions
Just
in
a
habit.
ton of different things we write on.
All 3 of us are analog note
Yeah.
takers.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. I won't do it sometimes. Like if I'm in a meeting and I'm trying to take notes quickly, I write slower, but I actually find that I'm more thoughtful when I write by hand. So I like doing that. Mm-hmm. So that's my kind of morning habit. And then I will be into my work day. So writing for work is very deadline driven, purpose driven. We need to send an email about something that's happening, and we need to have the copy by Thursday, and it's Monday. And so now it's, I have to figure out who I'm writing for, what the message is, verify what we're doing about whatever it is we're talking about, and then write the thing, which is, probably 100 words or less. It's not a lot of actual writing. It's more of the context around the writing that you spend a lot of time thinking about, and word choice and things like that. Once I'm done for the day in terms of work, my at-home writing is almost always in the evening after dinner and everything's done, and I sit in front of the TV. And that's always I pick a project for the day. So I don't like setting word count goals, but I've got 4 or 5 different things that I'm writing at any time. I've written dozens of essays that could be blog posts that if I ever wanted to publish, I could go throw up on a blog somewhere. I just do those for fun. I, at any one time, have 2 or 3 different novels that I'm poking away at, because I'm not actually ambitious in terms of like getting published with any of this. I'm just doing it for fun. Sometimes I'll write myself little like planning docs of like, you're going to do this thing and here's how you're going to do it. Like, if we're planning a trip and I want to go see a specific thing, I'll kind of like basically write a guide to myself, kind of more, but more long form, not a bullet list type of thing. So it's really just about sitting in front of the keyboard and getting some thoughts onto the digital page that are not work related and don't have that kind of pressure deadline. So it's not that I sit down at 8 p.m. every night and write for 45 minutes, and when it gets to 8:45, I slam that laptop shut. It's more of when I'm done for the day, my routine is to sit down with my tablet, usually with a keyboard attachment, and just write as it kind of comes to me. Or don't. If I'm like, I'm going to go play some video games tonight, or my wife and I are going to watch a movie, or I just am beat, I'll maybe read my book. So it's not like a strict sort of thing, whereas the daily work writing is very strict.
So that was something that Matt and I kind of debated almost throughout that episode when kind of went back and forth on the idea of goal setting as a part of habit building, and talking about word count goals versus time set goals versus writing every single day, setting like kind of whatever, like, so you're saying basically like when you've done the work to build this habit up enough, none of that is really necessary, or it kind of falls to the wayside.
It's not necessary for me. It definitely falls to the wayside. I think about it a lot less. I also want to clarify that if you are a person who is writing a book that you want to publish and sell, I think you should set some goals. You should say, I want to, this book should be on sale by date here, so you can work back to make that happen. But at that point, that's work. That's not writing for pleasure. That's not journaling for like your mental health. That's not just getting ideas and stories out because you don't want to stew on them yourself, or it's a way for you to process something. That's a different thing. And I think I think a lot of what you do right in that mindset can eventually become something you publish. But when you're not thinking about it in those terms, I think it's important to not hinder yourself with goals. Because if I know that I need to write 800 to 1,000 words for a blog post that's going to publish in 2 weeks for Lulu, and it's on, the topic of whether or not ebooks are good for the environment, which I don't know anything about, I just made that up. I've got that cursor blinking is telling me 800 words, 800 words, 800 words, where if I'm just like, you know what, I'm intrigued about whether or not e-readers are environmentally friendly, and I do a little research and start writing an essay on it for funsies, I don't feel that pressure. Mm-hmm. So it's a different mindset more than anything.
It's actually a really good point, because I feel like
Thank you.
You're welcome. I feel like I don't often count the amount of writing that I do on a daily basis because it's not fictional writing towards a project goal, so I don't consider it.
Yes.
But it is definitely like I'm writing thousands of words a day. There's maybe not towards my book.
Right. I mean, I get text messages from you sometimes. You're wordy. But that's exactly what I'm getting at is we all write a lot. We're naturally, we kind of have to in the world that we live in because there's so many things that require, emails and using a messenger on a retail site because they screwed up your order, or just so many places where we have to use our words to communicate. And that's still writing. And I think, untethering yourself from deadlines and goals can sometimes be freeing.
We were talking about the difference between like habit building and like actual like writing for a purpose, writing, which is where you were going with this. Yep. So like, do you want to elaborate on the distinction between those as far as you see them, or? So
yes, and I feel like this is kind of a lazy metaphor analogy. I'm terrible with words. Why do I have this job?
That's definitely true.
So I go out and walk after work because walking for you is good for you, and my calves are flabby and I want them to not be, and whatever reasons. Whereas the guy who lives next door to me goes out and jogs because he wants to run a marathon. He's already got, like, I'm not good at walking because I don't do it as much as I should, and I'm trying to reestablish the habit, and, maybe one day I'll build that up to jogging, but I am really tuned into getting a very baseline habit figured out. This guy's past all of that. It's routine when he is working towards a much bigger goal, which is to take that habit and turn it into something that's, noteworthy. Does that work? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. How do you approach that then, I guess? Like, how do you see that evolution of that habit building?
It's defining success. So if the goal is to build a habit, you should track it in the way that you and Matt discussed, or whatever method works for you. However you want to do that, time spent, words written, whatever. Once you've developed the habit, what does success look like? Is it maintaining the habit? Is it just staying at that level where you're, journaling, you're working? Because if the goal of the purpose of building the habit is to do something more, like write a book, then you have to have that second goal. You have that next thing that goes after the habit is built. And that's defining success. What is your success metric for the thing that you're trying to do? If it's to build the habit and you've done it, success, set a new goal. And I think that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier with, like, I try to be very rigid in the way I approach writing for Lulu because I know there's this whole process that goes into it that takes time, and we want to get things done in a timely fashion. We can't be late telling people about important updates to account settings, or we definitely want to, sing the praises of some new features that we've introduced as soon as they're available so that we can get people using them and trying them out, giving us feedback. So that rigidity kind of is the goal in the writing habit I developed for work. Whereas, like, my personal writing habit, the goal is kind of just happiness, like being happy that I've put these thoughts out there. And so you just get two very different approaches to how you go to writing that kind of content.
No notes.
All right.
Can't argue with that.
Hopefully there's another soundbite in there for you, too.
Oh, I'm sure there is.
Do my best.
I'm sure there is. How does it look? And again, if I'm getting ahead of myself on here, you can rein me in at any point.
This is the last thing I'm going to do.
It's fair. Outlines are...
Outlines
are suggestions in the studio. So.
I've noticed.
Yeah, well, it's fine. Which I guess even that is, something that I don't really think about all the time as writing. I write like 5-page outlines for these podcast episodes, and we use a fraction of the content within those outlines. And I somehow don't consider that writing.
And you should. And I think it's a huge, like, I wrote this outline for this episode, and when we had the idea of, talk about how your writing habit is different from, you and Matt's, I was like, I could talk about that, no problem, for an hour, sit me down, let's go right now. And then I started writing the outline out, and I realized all of these other kind of secondary and tertiary points that could be made, bits we could touch on if we wanted to, tangents we could take that are only slightly tangential instead of fun tangential, that I hadn't thought about. So the process of writing this outline that you're going to use a very little bit of is actually, you getting those ideas churning in your head.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, which maybe actually, sidebar, if anyone is interested in any of the things that we've talked about when it comes to like building a writing habit, or writing in public is something that we've talked about a lot on this podcast. Maybe start it as a podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe,
I don't think it's a bad idea.
Use a podcast to kind of feel through your process of writing and to talk through the process of what the book is going to look like and the content that you want to include in the book, and then take those transcripts and edit them into their final form.
Yeah, it's taking, again, goals.
Yeah.
If your goal is to have a book and a thing that you're good at doing, if you're comfortable talking, if you're comfortable with the logistics of podcasting, then that's a very, very good way to take some content that you can create in a form that you're more comfortable or adept at, and then build a habit from that. You might teach yourself how to write blog posts from your podcast transcripts, and then that develops your writing habit.
Or vice versa.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, that too. I've talked many times on air and in blog content and social media content and whatever else about how my number one favorite editing tip of all time is to read your writing out loud.
I hate doing it, but it is right.
It works.
Yep.
It works. So if you're trying to workshop some older blog content that you've written and you want to turn it into a book, and you're looking for the best way to workshop it, make long form video content out of it, make a podcast episode out of it.
Yeah.
Even if you scrap half of your content, but that is unrelated to building a writing habit.
So while we're on that slight tangent, though, you mentioned the bit where, you could take a podcast transcript and edit it into something. And I'm going to go read this quote that you had from the last podcast episode about writing habits as well.
Love this.
I like editing more than I like writing. That's one of the things I've learned about myself. That's one of the things that slows me down a lot. And so you were talking about this in terms of like trying to hit a word count goal, and you have this kind of, you stop and self-edit as you're writing, which is something I'm sure lots of people have a problem with. But what I wanted to my point with that is editing is writing. And I think that's something people forget. We'll say it's part of the writing process or whatever kind of terminology you want, but like taking the words that you've already written and making them words that you actually want someone to read is still writing. And I think there's a lot of important value in that. So I think it's not the worst thing, and it's one of the reasons I don't like, strict word count or time stamped goals for writing. I get the value in building a habit, but once you're comfortable writing, I don't like doing that, because I could write 1,500 words of trash. That's fine. Set it aside. I'll come back to it later. Or I could write 500 words that I scrutinized heavily and I'm much happier with. Both are good. They're both good things to me.
That's a really fair point, honestly. Also, as credentials, or as a not credentials, what's a testimonial to Paul's advice. Paul has made me a better writer in so many ways.
All right.
Because of him editing my writing.
Yes.
And because of me paying attention to how he's edited my writing and realizing that he's correct about the things that he's editing.
There's so many little bits in there I want you to clip out as sound bites for me to just take home.
That I will give you as much content as you want from this.
Paul has made me a better writer is going to be my ringtone.
Okay.
Do people still do ringtones? I haven't had my phone make sounds for me in like 8 years.
No, but I do think that you should make it your personal text alert for when I text you. The once a month that I text you.
Can I do that?
Yeah,
I think
so.
Thing?
I mean, you used to be able to do that. I don't know if you still can.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, let's do that.
Let's say we wanted to share some kind of actionable content in some way, shape, or form for the people that are listening to this. Mm-hmm. If there is somebody listening to this that is like, okay, I have been working on the writing habit building, like the habit building practice, and I've been doing a lot of personal writing as my way to just get in the habit of writing every day. And now I want to make that transition from, like, I feel like my writing habit is down. I'm walking 3 miles every day, and now I want to up that to running a 5K.
Oh, I like how you came back around to the... Was that an analogy or a metaphor?
Oh, you're asking the wrong person.
Okay. Well,
you're the person that I usually ask that kind of question.
I just Google it. But yes, so I do think the key thing there is to set very, very small, low goals at the beginning, because you don't want to do something as you move from just writing for yourself and for the kind of benefits to yourself of exploring your ideas and talking with your fingers. You don't want to like burn yourself out if you make your goal too hard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I really like the idea of writing a daily note. It's a new file. It creates itself every day for me in the morning, and it's just there when I open up my notebook. And like I said, I don't put a lot of words into it every day, but it becomes this, it's fun. Whereas if I made a goal where I need to sit down and write 500 words every morning in this note about what I did the day before, it becomes tedious. So really think about, one, what you want to do with what you're writing at the end of it. Is it writing a novel? Is it writing a memoir? Is it, you know, the copy for a website that's going to sell some other product that you've created? Whatever it is you're writing, think about where it's going, like long term, and then work back from that in very, very meager little chunks at the beginning, because you don't want your habit to get broken by trying to take it to that next level. It's, to go back to the running metaphor, maybe you're not actually ready for that 5K and what's a running injury? Pull a hammy or something.
Sure. I don't know. I gave up on running.
Me too. I got a bad knee.
I'm a serial walker.
Yeah.
Oh, with my ankles, but sure. Yeah.
Like you walk with cereal?
Do I look like somebody who can walk and eat at the same time?
Fair enough.
You watched me spill a drink on myself when I was sitting at a table earlier. It's the couch to 5K method.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a good one. I like that. Actually.
Which, if you're ever interested in running, that is actually the most efficient workout plan I've ever actually used. It works every time I've done it.
But I don't know. I really think it's important to keep a separation between the idea of just writing for yourself versus a goal-based writing. And if you're transitioning that from something you were just doing for yourself to something with a goal, you have to be really, really gentle, or you're risking breaking all of the good habits you've built up. It's
kind of like when you're A/B testing something and you're only supposed to make one change at a time.
Yeah, 100%.
Because if you change 5 things, you're not going to know what was the one thing that made the difference.
Nothing upsets me more than that.
I understand.
I shouldn't say nothing, but in the workspace, that is one of the things that bothers me.
I totally understand.
Yep.
Is there anything that you do? I know, like, some of the writing advice that people love to give is like having a dedicated writing space or things like that. Like, is there something that you do with, I know as you talked through your like day to day, but specifically to kind of differentiate between personal writing and professional writing? Is there anything that you do to kind of shift your mindset one way or another on that?
How much time do we have left in this
episode? As much as you want. I
am very tactile in my thinking, and so I like to spend probably too much time thinking about the tools I use and refining those processes. Helps me. I know it's something that a lot of people on the web would tell you is a bad idea, like don't spend too much time thinking about how you color-coded your spreadsheets or the fonts and spacing in your Google Docs and things like that. But yes, I actually think there is some value, especially in differentiating what you do professionally versus what you do personally. So as I said, separate notebooks, physical notebooks. I have, they're 2 very different styles, so I know which one is which. When I'm writing in my personal notebook, I use one of my favorite pens because I think it's a really smooth, nice writing pen. I like the way it grips, and it is kind of comforting almost to write with it. When I'm writing for work, I use a fairly specific kind of ballpoint that you have to grip and pinch and leaves my fingers hurting a little bit. But I also think there's some like specificity to that, and that I want to be more tight versus loose in my writing styles. When I write for work, we use Google Workspace for work, so I keep everything in that workspace. So I just used Google Docs to write because that's what's available. But my personal writing, I use a tool called Obsidian, which is a local storage for markup files. So it's very simple text files stored locally. And I keep those 2 things very separate because I want them to be very separate.
Do you use different fonts?
Currently, no. I've actually been pretty big on the like Trebuchet MS font for a while for some reason. Yeah, I know. Not everybody else likes it.
It's okay.
But for a long time, yes, I was. I would use 2 different fonts for my personal writing and my professional writing.
That's actually never occurred to me before you said that, or before you were saying the different pens and the different tools, but because I also use the same font for all of my different writing, whether it's work or at home. So that's actually never, but we do all have, like, everybody on our team that writes copy has a different preferred font.
Yeah.
And you can always tell who started a document based on which font it's written in.
And I will change it so quickly.
I'll change it back.
Yeah, I know you will. I also do my best, and sometimes like travel forces this, but I try not to use my Lulu laptop for writing personal things. I'll respond to an email if I have to or something like that through my own personal Gmail. And when I'm traveling and I don't want to bring multiple machines because you're packing light, I'll use it for that. But my goal is to physically use a different machine to write for myself. I have an iPad with a little carrying case thing that has a keyboard attached to it, or I'll just use like a Bluetooth keyboard or something. Or I'll sit at my personal computer at home and write some, but that's more of an entertainment machine, so I tend not to use that for writing as much as, watching movies or gaming or something like that. Working on projects, stuff like that. So it's really important to me to separate the tools as well. The one place that I differ in that opinion is that I will sit at the exact same desk when I'm working from home for both. I don't really know why. I do have a desk set up for work and for my personal stuff at home. But I'll drift back and forth. I'll go use my work desk for personal writing and vice versa. I think it's because both of them are kind of nicely set up and both get good light, and I like the chairs and blah, blah, blah. So like there's not a lot of, I don't actually ascribe to that whole you need a separate space. Yeah,
that's always been one that's made me crazy, honestly, because that one in particular, I'm always like, not everybody lives in a 7-bedroom house, right? Like, you talked about having different tools for your writing. So you talked about having like your different notebooks and pens and whatever. What other tools do you use for writing in terms of professional or personal writing, like software or anything like that? What else do you like to use?
Well, so I'll mention one more piece of hardware. I think it's actually really nice to have a good keyboard. I think most laptops, MacBook keyboard is fine, but there is something more ergonomic and more enjoyable about a good keyboard. And I'm not going to tell anybody what I think that necessarily means, but try some different things if you have the opportunity, because that might influence your joy. If your hands cramp up or if you're uncomfortable with the typing flow of a keyboard, that can slow you down.
The ASMR of the keys clicking.
Yes, thank you. Yeah,
actually for real, genuinely. I feel very satisfied with myself when I can hear myself typing at a consistent pace. I
feel like I'm busy when I can hear you typing from the desk next to me.
That's true. I am a very loud typer on my clickety-clackety keyboard.
But whatever works best for you, figure that out and then lean into that. Hardware is one of the things we tend to overlook because we just have our laptop or we have our phone or we have our machine that we're using to do the thing. But like getting one that's actually comfortable and enjoyable for you to use, I think is pretty important. Back around to software. So I made a list in this outline, and I don't want to read it verbatim necessarily, but like we use a lot of different tools that we use for writing at this company, and it's just kind of wild how many different places you put words in terms of software. And one of the things that made me realize as I was thinking about that long list is, and we already touched on this, but like formatting font texts, like it looks different in every place. And so you have to kind of unmarry yourself from your content looking a certain way and let it just be words and trust that, the creative team is going to turn this into a beautiful PDF or a web page or whatever with whatever font they think is right. And so for professional writing, I think the best thing for me has been to find a consistent, I think I use 11-point trebuchet with a little bit of space between the lines. And I just use that for everything so that it's very consistent when I'm writing for work. I try to set my like heading styles to the exact same, like they're all that same font, just a couple sizes bigger. Really consistent and easy so that it's easier for me to detach myself from the physicality of the words I've written, and they're just words, and I can give them out to whoever needs them next so that they can put them into whatever form they need to take for work. Personally, my favorite writing tool for my personal life is Obsidian. I think I just mentioned that earlier too, but it's a free software. I wrote a blog post about it a while ago,
and I will link it in the show notes.
I've written a number of blog posts about note-taking tools that I've reviewed over time. This is the only one I still consistently use. Super duper simple. It's a local one, so you can use cloud storage to use it on a variety of devices, but it allows you to save your stuff locally. So, you know, if you did all of your writing in Google Docs and tomorrow Google just didn't exist anymore,
I don't know what I would do.
all of your stuff could disappear. So I like having things locally. And then what I will do in there is I think they call them vaults, is your kind of different like top level file folders. I will have a vault for novel writing. I'll have a vault for travel planning, for essays and blogs, for my daily notes, so that I can, and then those will have different layouts. You know, the template for my daily note looks very different than the kind of blank page that I would use for writing a short story. Different fonts, different sizings. Again, I should, not different fonts. I've been pretty consistent with my font lately, but it gives me the opportunity to kind of create that specificity, which I really do enjoy. Kind of like I said, the physicality of looking at what this is going to look like. And I can get lost in that. And I know that sometimes people will say that's a bad thing because you're playing with the thing rather than doing the thing. But I do think, you know, you're still working with your words as kind of a form of editing. And I think that still contributes, whether it's getting you to a word count goal or not. I think that's still a contribution being made.
I very much agree with that. And I think that is something that I do a lot of content creation where I have to keep my content very organized. Mm-hmm. Before I was doing the podcast, I was a social media manager here, and it was a lot of short form copy that was slightly different on different platforms and things like that. And I am very big on color coding and very big on having everything be kind of laid out in a way that I can see it at a glance and get an idea in my head of like, okay, I'm glancing at that calendar right now and I can tell that there's a variety of different content going on in that week without reading a single word on the screen because of the colors. And I can tell, and also obviously it has to be aesthetically pleasing, because if it's an ugly combination of colors, then that's heinous and I don't want to look at that. But I do think that that is actually something that's really important in organizing your content and in like, you know, creating this non-hostile creative environment for yourself, where you need to have that, like whatever is going to help you streamline your process and like push away the distractions and go like, okay, I can just like, there's nothing to distract me from actually just writing this content and going forward like this. So I totally agree. I think that's a really important, and I can't work in an environment where it's like, I can't look at this doc because it's like 6 different fonts and the colors clash and it looks terrible. Like I have to take the time to organize it first.
I have had that happen where I'm sure you have too, where you've been handed something to review and you had to first reformat it. So that you could handle it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that's important to know about yourself and to understand so that you're not getting lost in that sauce, because as you know, I said earlier, you don't want to spend too much time formatting and figuring out and tinkering with the logistics of how you're writing. You want to actually be doing some writing. And if you can just really define for yourself, this is where I sit with, I need things to look a certain way, I need the colors to not clash, whatever. You just be realistic about that so that you can lean into it and move past it as quickly as you can. I think you made a reference in the other episode that we were mentioning about, you know, if you give yourself an hour to write, you'll spend the first 40 minutes making a playlist that have just the right vibes, and then spend the last 20 minutes vomiting words on the page, which is not ideal, right?
Right.
But it is. I mean, if what you need to get, if the difference between 0 words and those 500 words is 40 minutes of making a playlist, know that's what you need to do and just do it.
Do you listen to music when you write?
Sometimes I do a lot of instrumental when I'm writing, for personal anyway, because I tend to be more kind of in my own head with what I'm writing, and I don't want those voices. If I'm writing for work, I just put something on, usually a podcast, like you and Matt talk in my ear a fair amount when I'm working, or
love that.
Some music. But I don't need it, and I actually am one of those people that will go like an hour into doing anything and realize it's completely silent. Right. And yeah.
No shade, but
yeah, sure. No, that's fair. And I won't even realize it's happened sometimes. I'll just like be like, wow, it's really quiet in here. It's like, oh, it's because you're the only one in the room and you are the one who has control over whether or not there is noise.
Fair enough.
Yep.
Fair enough, yeah.
What's your go-to vibes when you're trying to listen to someone write?
It actually also very much depends on what I'm writing.
Yeah.
If it's something that is new and I haven't had the time to curate a specific playlist for it, I will usually go either with like a like ambiance video on YouTube. Like I love those. There's like 8-hour like lo-fi loops or
Yeah.
But I do actually tend to curate playlists for like personal writing. If I'm doing like if I'm committing to a new book or a new story or something like that, I will actually curate a playlist for it.
One of the other things that I really find important when I'm separating my kind of, and it's hard to control at work, but the lighting. So when I'm at home, I really like to have natural light, but like I will diffuse it through those kind of shades that block some of it. Or if I'm writing in the evening, I don't want like a harsh light on, like a little lamp somewhere on the other side of the room or something, because, you know, the backlight on the screen is going to be enough.
Right.
So like when I'm doing writing that's just for me, I like to have a lot of control over that ambiance. Whereas, you know, the lights in this office are miserable and they're blinding and there's nothing you can do about it. So you have to kind of adapt and separate those things. So it's helpful for me to control the lighting when I'm doing my own writing versus the uncontrollable lighting.
So I mean, I think, not to contradict your original thesis.
No, do it.
I mean, I always live to contradict you.
Sure.
But it's fine. But I do actually think that you have more in common with the habit building that Matt and I talked about in that original episode than you like to admit. The difference is what what details you need to focus on in order to build the habit, or not build the habit, because you've already clearly established that habit. But like, you know, we were talking about the fundamentals of like just getting in the habit of writing on a daily basis, like what to do if you're hitting writer's block and you're like unable to get started on that, like whatever. And your focus is more on like, okay, we've got the daily habit down, but like these are the things that I need to do. It's all about control, really. It's all about like knowing knowing yourself well enough to know what you need to control in order to create the environment that you need to get your writing done.
Yeah, I actually think that's a really good way of framing it. I was probably being more spicy than I needed to be when I said I wanted to come in and contradict one of your previous episodes. With my outline,
I think you could have been a lot spicier. I think we could have gone full. No, you're wrong.
Right. I could argue against that, but I do think you're right. I think it is, and most of what I was getting at was that, you know, developing that writing habit and turning it into a routine that isn't something you have to think about so much is kind of only the first step.
Yeah.
The next step is then deciding, what am I doing with this writing that I'm creating habitually, and what do I have to do to achieve that? And that's kind of what I wanted to get. I hope what we're circling around here today and spinning towards is this idea of like writing habit, important, lots of different ways you can do that. You and I and Matt could sit around arguing for weeks about the ins and outs and the details of how we achieve that. But once you get to that point where you've created a bit of a habit behind it, you have to then start thinking about what I'm going to do with it. Even if what you're doing with it is file it away for funsies and never read it again or read it in a couple of years or whatever. Name that, call that out so that you know what you're doing, and that's going to be part of what sustains the habit.
Yeah, I mean, that's with any habit.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that with no matter what kind of habit you're building, are you running because, or are you going for a walk every day because you want to start running, because you want to run a marathon in a year?
Yep.
Are you going for a walk every day because you want to breathe fresh air?
Right.
Spoiler alert, you're not going to go for a walk every day after like a week, because you can just sit outside in your backyard and drink a beer instead.
Right.
Like, which actually sounds way better than
it does.
Going for a walk.
Way better than walking.
It's not true. I love walking.
I like sitting too. Yes. No,
why not both?
Walking. Yeah.
But yeah, I do think that is kind of the point that we're circling towards, or circling around.
Yes,
for sure.
If you've got something you want to do with it, you've got to figure out how to take that habit and mold it to fit that without breaking it, or, you know, without making it mundane or boring or unfun anymore. And I think it's one of the reasons that I felt like this was worth talking about again is that, and I'll go back to that runner kind of reference, is people who are interested in writing and who want to create a book, that's in whatever form that might be, put a lot of pressure on themselves. And I think just the concept of it being a writer is its own form of pressure, whereas it's like going out and saying, for me, I want to run a 5K or a marathon or whatever. I'm putting all that pressure on myself. Nobody is going to, like, if I say, oh yeah, I'm working on running on a thing, someone's either going to be like, that's really cool, or they're not going to be interested at all and they're going to move on. But like, if you say you're writing a book to someone, you're putting a ton of pressure on yourself. And I think then you have to, like, for me especially, I've said this before, where someone's like, hey, what are you working on? What are you trying to do this year? What are your goals for this year? And I'll be like, I'm going to finish a book. And then I'll be chatting with them in October and they'll be like, how's that book going? And I'll be like, I cannot believe how angry I am that you remembered that.
Yep.
I
got mad at myself this morning when I was listening to this episode from January, and Matt and I talked about like writing a book this year, and I was listening to it and I was like,
how's it going? But I'm joking, but like,
but
that's
no,
that
but
pressure.
yeah, yes.
And so I think it's really important to not think about it in those terms and think about it in terms of, one, develop a habit, figure out what the right way to develop that is for you. Is it spending time every day? Is it having a strict writing word count? Is it having a very loose one? Is it just having a box to check in your habit tracker that says, I have written words today? And if they're just those words, that's it and good enough, whatever. But then you transition it into something where you want to have a bigger goal and you don't want to have that pressure that lands on you when you get there. And I think that's tough. That's really hard to do. We can sit here and say, hey, just don't do that. Don't do that. And it doesn't just make it easy.
Sure, absolutely. And I do think that's because I have been like, kind of thinking about this as we've been talking through it and trying to figure out like, okay, how do we narrow in on the point that we've been circling around this whole time? And like, how do we kind of like turn this into like, okay, you're done. You've done the work of building up your habit. Like now it's time to take on the next steps. But I think kind of the point that I'm reaching and the point that we've kind of talked through is that because it's so dependent on what your goals are for your content, there is really no like clear cut way for us to say like, here are your next steps now that you've built that habit up, because it's so dependent on what you're planning on doing with that habit.
Yep. And how you've built the habit can impact it too, because you need to use whatever tools you've developed by building that habit, whether it's X number of words a day or sitting in front of the computer writing for a certain amount of time or whatever, and transition that into a way that'll actually work for achieving whatever your goal is. And then there's also that we touched on editing, but that's another kind of mindset shift you have to have once you get past that habit of, do you need to develop an editing habit? Should that be part of your writing habit? Does it tie into the bigger goal, or is it something you're going to totally, hand off and you're not going to edit anything and you're going to pay or, get the assistance of peers, and your eyes got real big. You can edit your own things. I'm talking like the royal you.
I know, but actually not even just me in general. Like I actually can't, I think that's so intrinsically a part of writing. I can't imagine having no editing, like having no touch at all on my own writing, like just handing it off to somebody immediately and running away from it.
So it's figuring out how the editing side of it fits in your process and making that part of writing. Because like we were saying earlier, it really is. It's an important part of writing, however much or little of it you do. Yeah.
Well, and I think that also kind of goes hand in hand with some of the environment building stuff that we talked about too, where like, as I am color coding and color organizing my spreadsheets, that's one of the things that I'm thinking about as I'm doing it is like, okay, I'm color coding it based on what type of content bucket each of these different types of content goes into. And as I'm doing this, I'm realizing that I need to better define what these different buckets are, or I need to, kind of like, I'm realizing that I'm kind of missing this type of content, or I'm realizing that like it kind of goes hand in hand with the editing process because it makes me think conscientiously about the content that I'm creating, whether that's short form social media content, long form blog and podcast episodes, whatever that might be. So I think that is kind of all inherently. Yeah.
So I'm gonna throw in one real quick pitch for AI.
Go ahead.
In that there's lots of hurdles and roadblocks and things that can get in the way of what we were just talking about. And we're not making it sound easy, but it does kind of, when two people just step back and are like, oh, just do it this way, it can sound easy. If you're working on building up a habit and you're feeling stumped or you're feeling writer's block, just go to an AI and say, give me a writing prompt. Go to ChatGPT and be like, create a writing prompt for me, and just create a little challenge for yourself or something like that. Or feed it what you've written so far and say, what would you write next? Give me 2 more lines, and then build off of those. Or just one of those ways that we haven't had access to for so long. And now that we do, I think it's a really good way to not build the habit, but like help keep you in that habit space sometimes.
Yeah.
And I know AI can be kind of controversial, and so I don't want to give the impression that I'm saying you should just use it to write stuff for you, but it is there, and it can help you keep moving forward when you feel kind of held up.
Yeah, I mean, that is the case to use it.
Yes.
It, absolutely. We were talking about this yesterday. We were talking about, actually, for podcast episodes, how one of the steps of my process for every podcast episode is, as I'm drafting the show notes and the title and the episode summaries and social media copy and stuff like that, Paul is my review person on all that. Mm-hmm. And I usually come up with about 5 titles for every episode. And Paul made a joke that I never choose the one that he says he likes this one, which, whether or not that's true, it probably is true. Whether or not that's true, that is, to me, a really valuable thing to have, because, like, Paul telling me which one he likes kind of emphasizes for me which one I like when I'm feeling indecisive.
Whatever I didn't like.
Sometimes.
But yeah, no, you're right.
But it is, it really, like, it forces me to make the argument in my head of, like, if you choose a title that I'm like, and I thought I was indifferent on the titles, and then you chose that one, then I am forced to reckon with the, why am I feeling this way, and which one do I like better? Mm-hmm. And that is invaluable, but not everybody has a Paul. So if you don't have somebody to...
Count yourself lucky.
Absolutely not.
No, you.
No. Oh, count me.
Yes.
Yes, obviously. Sorry, do I have to go back to the Paul made me a better writer soundbite? Okay.
Oh, but you just did it again. It's great.
You're welcome.
2 versions.
I thought you were saying, if you don't have a Paul, count yourself lucky, I was going to fight you.
I mean,
that.
Also yes, but for a different reason.
No,
right?
Absolutely not. But if you are unlucky enough to not have a Paul, or somebody that you can bounce your ideas off of, or somebody that you can use as a gut check thing, that's what generative AI is super useful for.
Yes.
Because even if I disagree with everything that it tells me in its output, at least now I have an opinion on something.
Yep. Wheels are still turning. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I kind of don't. I feel like that was kind of like our landing place.
Yeah. All right.
Maybe. Although I don't think we have time to talk through more tools.
Okay.
But on the heels of the AI reference, and we're definitely going to link the Obsidian blog post that you wrote in the show notes. Anytime that I have ever linked any kind of product or software review in the show notes for this podcast, it was something that Paul wrote. And
I do like playing with new software.
You do, and I have referenced before that we don't do sponsored content. We don't do sponsored reviews. These are all things that Paul has reviewed because he's a nerd and likes this kind of stuff.
Yes.
And wants to actually test it out for himself. So I'm going to ask you to pick off air, later. I'm going to ask you to pick your top 2 other than Obsidian that you've written up reviews for on the blog, and we'll include those in the show notes as recommendations, whether they're personal, professional, mix of both, whatever.
I could probably do one of each or something. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that would be really fun. So definitely check the show notes for that.
Okay.
Is there any I don't know, anything that we didn't talk about that you want to? Any last little advice or anything?
I know it's a you and Matt thing, but you got to tell me what your bracelets say so you can kind of maintain your streak of getting them in every podcast episode.
Well, not only is it going to maintain the streak, but you are also the only other person in my life that ever asks me what they say. So shout out to that. It is consistent.
Yeah, right.
And it is authentic. And I will say, today? I do actually. One of them says, all this in heaven.
Okay.
One of them says, for the plot.
For the plot.
Uh-huh. And the last one says, me and my ghosts.
Okay. I don't know what those reference, any of them, so.
Yes, you do.
Okay.
All This in Heaven is a Florence song.
Oh, it is. I sounded familiar.
Yeah.
I don't know her discography as well as I said I should. I'm so sorry.
I hope Susie doesn't listen to this
That's
podcast.
Why I just apologized.
Okay.
She doesn't, but...
Okay, that's fair. And actually, Me and My Ghost is from the song that Taylor and Florence did together.
Oh, fun.
Although
fun.
that was not an intentional choice.
Gotcha. Oh, it wasn't. Okay.
No, that I didn't think about that one. I just
Happy accident.
yeah.
Cool.
So thanks for asking.
Of course.
Yeah. All right. Any last minute anything we didn't say? Do you want to scroll through the outline and see if there's anything in here that you were like, oh man, I did mean to say this. I keep getting stuck on the one bullet point that just says disagree, but I think we did actually. I think we did actually talk about that, so I don't think we have to go through it.
Yeah. I mostly wrote that one in there to get you thinking.
One of my favorite quotes from my favorite podcast that I listen to, that I've been listening to for like 6 years. They do 2 or 3 episodes a week. Mm-hmm. So they have a ton of content, but literally one of my favorite quotes from it is one of the hosts, they were like getting heated about something and he just goes, counterpoint, you are wrong.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was like just the whole like, and they actually like, they kind of gave him a hard time for that after the fact. And I was like, that was the most succinct and efficient quote in the way that anyone has ever shut down an argument that I've ever heard.
That guy's had arguments on Reddit before, I guarantee it.
Oh, 100% for sure.
I feel like that's how most of them end.
Maybe they should.
Yeah, probably.
I don't think either one of us is wrong though. I think.
No, I don't think it's I don't think anybody's wrong. I think there's just so much challenging about writing. Yeah. And about taking something that can be sort of personal and making it professional. Yeah. And especially for anyone that's, has a busy life but wants to create content and write and then eventually, do something with it, sell it, share it, whatever form that might take. It can be really daunting. And so I just thought it was kind of worth getting into that in a little bit more depth and taking it kind of the next step beyond just habit building, because there's just it's not a lot more. The habit building is the biggest part of it, but that next little bit is important too.
I mean, not only do I agree with that, but between the 3 of us, you are the one with the best and most established regular writing routine. So I think we should all take your advice.
Can I have that soundbite too?
Yeah. Well, maybe.
Yeah, but I mean, thank you. And I don't want to say that like my method works for anybody but myself, but I think there's value in considering things in kind of 2 phases when you're building a writing habit and then building towards writing a thing.
I think that's really important. And I do think even if this episode, we could have gotten in here and literally just verbatim regurgitated the last episode, but with your version instead of Matt's version. I think kind of the TLDR of both of these episodes combined is that it's a very different process for everybody. And I think I said this in that last episode too. I don't trust like rigid online writing advice that is like, this is the 8-step surefire way to build a daily writing habit, because it's way too personal for anybody's like one size fits all habit building. And so I think the best way to actually authentically teach people how to do this and how to get good at this is to give multiple different viewpoints of it and say, this is what works for me. Well, this is what works for me. This is the overlap between us. This is where neither one of us touched this, but Matt touched on this and whatever. And I think that's cool to have. So
one of the quotes that I wrote down from the last episode from you is, consistency does not have to mean rigidity. Wow. And it's exactly what you just said there, but I think that sums it up really nicely.
Every now and then I do have a good one-liner.
More often than you think.
Wow. Yeah, that's so true. But thank you for joining me today. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks for having us. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us. Is that what I just said?
Yep.
I was doing so well.
You were doing well.
Anyway, thank you for having me. I enjoyed this. These chairs are nice. I'm glad we're not on those stools that you had before, because they're kind of hard, and I think I would be moving around too much.
There was definitely that. Yeah. I do kind of miss the table.
Yeah,
but the chairs are comfortable.
You need those like tables that just sit over the top of the chair.
I do really want one of those. Yeah. I'm thinking about it.
Little bench thing.
Yep. Yeah, we'll see. But hopefully there's some kind of valuable insight in there.
Yeah.
I think there is. I think that when we cut this all down and put it all together, there's going to be some good stuff in here. If you were listening to this and you thought this was an enormous waste of your time, I'm so sorry. But also you would not be this far in the episode if you did. So good riddance.
Indeed.
It's fine. But if you were listening to this and you want to dive deeper.
You have an email address for this podcast, right?
Yeah, it's Hobday.
But
it's podcast@lulu.com.
Yeah, there you go. I thought that was what it was, but I didn't want to be wrong. But like, send Lauren an email and tell her you want to hear more in-depth conversations about the nuances of the philosophy of writing and what goes into it.
Yeah,
and I'll come back and wax intellectual about writing some more. And
tell us about your pen collection. Could you bring your pen collection in for the video next time?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not like you're going to send me out on a shopping spree now because I'm going to need some sort of nice container to put it in. It's not like well visualized container sort of thing, but
that's okay.
I can figure that out.
I think that's worth it.
Sure. You want to just sit here and I can go over all of my favorite pens?
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds great.
Okay.
But if you have any questions, if you have any interest in deeper dives into writing or other things that go along with writing, habit building, anything like that, how to turn your personal content into professional content, whatever, anything we've talked about in here, email us, podcast@lulu.com. Matt will see it then too. So you can let him know how great this episode was. If you have any questions for me or Paul or Matt, reach out, leave us a comment on social media, leave us a review, like and subscribe. I feel like everything is blurring together. I no longer remember what I've plugged and what I haven't.
Go read my blog.
Yeah.
We definitely talked about that some.
Yeah, but blog.lulu.com.
Blog, there you go. That's the website.
That's it. It's definitely linked in the show notes in at least 4 places, but go check it out anyway for sure. I don't think you can. Can you subscribe to the blog?
You can subscribe to our email list in every blog post, and then you'll get an email on Fridays, which either includes the newest blog post or is on a theme for something we think is going to be interesting for you, and you might get a slightly older blog post.
And a podcast episode.
And if you're lucky, a video. You know, I feel like when Chelsea did one of these, she was plugging her YouTube channel like every 5 minutes, and I missed the mark on that one real hard.
Well, it's okay. You get more show notes content than Chelsea does.
I get them words.
You sure do.
Talking with my fingers. Okay. I'm gonna stop saying that.
And that's the note to end on. Thank you so much for listening with your ears and not talking with your fingers or your mouth. But if you would like to talk to us with your fingers, please do. I can't.
That outro is amazing. You should record it and use it for every episode.
I have to go. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next week. To learn more about this episode, check out the show notes on publishprosperpodcast.com. Publish and Prosper is brought to you by Lulu.com. To hear more episodes like this one, please like and subscribe wherever you listen. Thanks for tuning in.